Hi guys, and welcome to the notes on wind energy. Wind energy is actually the fastest growing non-depletable energy in the world. It has been grown significantly from less than 10 gigawatts that were being produced in 1996 to 300 gigawatts today. A lot of countries produce significant amounts of wind energy, including Denmark, the Netherlands, and the UK. The benefits of wind energy is that, as we talked about, that they're non-depletable and they are free and they are clean. Clean meaning you're not using um, anything to process the energy that's being made. Obviously, you have to use energy to build the equipment, but once the equipment and the blades are set up and the turbines are set up, you basically are not using any other type of energy to process um, that source. You basically goes from the wind energy straight to electricity, and we're going to look at the models on how that works. It's also the wind farms. If they are on land, the land can be shared with other industries, like for example cattle. And you're gonna see that there's also some ocean offshore farms. Obviously, they're just built in the ocean, and the ocean can also have um, any type of sea life or whatever, so you're not constricting the space except for the equipment being put there. Some of the drawbacks are that unless you are producing energy and taking it to the grid, you are the equipment to store that energy, the batteries are really expensive. The bird and bat collisions are a problem with these, but we're gonna see in a moment when we look at data that even though it's bad, it's not as bad as some of the other things that damage um, birds and bats. And many people do not like the way that they look and feel that they're kind of noisy. Probably you guys have seen some of these because I've seen them in Florida and I've seen them in other states and other countries. So I assume that you guys have probably seen these wind farms before. Um, they're not as noisy as I thought they would be, but I guess if you're like in a quiet space, you might notice the difference. Okay, so here is data that shows how birds are actually dying across the US. And so notice that the number one bird killer is actually cats, and that is a lot of cats. A lot of cats are killing a lot of birds. So notice that is almost 2 billion cats. I mean, sorry, 2 billion birds are being lost to cats. And if you notice, in terms of the amount of birds that are being lost due to wind turbines is actually the lowest compared to some of the other, um, causes. Of course, 300,000 birds are a lot of birds. So we have to keep things into perspective that, you're still losing a lot of birds, but we're losing more birds to window glass crashes. I don't know if that has ever happened to you guys, but it's happened to me, where a bird doesn't realize there's a window and it crashes into it and it dies. And look at that, is 676 million birds die because of that. That's a lot much bigger number of things that ways that we can fix than wind turbines. So just to put things into perspective, that's really not a good scientific argument to say that wind turbines kill so many birds. Okay, so I wanted to show you two videos. The first one is how blades are transported. That's one of the issues, that this equipment is very large, and so the transportation becomes an issue. And the other one is the drawbacks and benefits of wind energy. So as you saw in this video, these blades are humongous. They're over 20 um, tons, and they're very, very long. And so it's very tricky to put them in places where they would go, like up mountains. In Costa Rica, there's a lot on the mountain range. And typically, at least in my country, there aren't good roads. So there's a lot of, challenges and dangers to this. Here is the next video that about benefits and drawbacks of wind power.
Wind is a powerful source of energy on our planet. In fact, many of us have seen it in action, propelling sailboats across open seas or turning the blades of a farm's windmill to grind grain or pump water. Modern wind turbines are basically sleeker, higher-tech versions of the windmills of the past. But instead of using the wind to do farm work, they're designed to convert wind energy into electricity. Here's how it works. Wind blowing across a turbine's blade creates more pressure on one side of the blade than the other. This causes the mechanism of all three connected blades to turn. This rotation pushes on a series of spinning parts inside the body of the turbine, which in turn spins a generator, producing electricity. Because wind is always blowing somewhere across the surface of the Earth, it's considered a renewable resource. And because the only thing required to turn a wind turbine is moving air, wind farms emit no greenhouse gases. However, even though it's clean and abundant, there are a number of reasons we still don't use wind power more widely. The first, and perhaps most important, is that the wind doesn't always blow, at least not always in the same spot, and technologies for storing lots of electricity for later use are currently very expensive. Another problem is location. It doesn't make sense to put wind farms just anywhere. The best sites are open, windy places, which are often far from city centers where energy demand is greatest. So long transmission lines are necessary to move the electricity to where it's needed. Finally, while wind farms are relatively cheap to operate, they cost a lot to build, especially in comparison to existing coal and natural gas power plants. The result is that many wind projects simply never get off the ground. At the moment, wind power makes up only a small portion of the electricity produced in America, but it's a rapidly growing industry that many experts believe could one day slash fossil fuel consumption. And just like solar, it will become cheaper and easier to use if we can find better ways to store the electrical energy it generates.
Okay, so hopefully that gave you some really good information about the benefits and drawbacks of wind energy and how challenging some of these things can be. So here is how a turbine works. So notice that basically the blades are built in an angle so that when the wind hits, the blade is turned, and then there's a gearbox that absorbs that mechanical energy and sends it to the generator, and the generator basically does the conversion of mechanical energy into electrical energy. But notice there's a transformer, and then there's underground electric lines. So the transformer changes the voltage of the energy that is being sent from the generator into the right voltage that is used for electrical cables. So this generator and this gearbox and that transformer, those are actually the most challenging equipment, especially the transformer. They're very specialized, these transformers that are used to make these changes of energy. and so they're probably the weakest part of the wind turbine. Okay, so the last slide that I have for you is about offshore wind parks. And basically, these are wind parks, wind farms that are built on the ocean. And of course, there's a benefit you heard on the video that sometimes wind energy is not consistent. And so you don't get a constant feed of energy. But usually at the beach, it's pretty windy all the time, if not most of the time, much more than inland. So that's a benefit of building the wind offshore. Um, so you're able to get more energy, and you get probably higher gusts, so you can produce more energy. However, as you can imagine, building this in the water is a huge challenge. You can only go, I think, up to 200 meters underground, and then it becomes super challenging to make these concrete bases to ensure that these are safe and they stay there. You also can have problems in the ocean with natural events like hurricanes that make it very challenging to have a piece of equipment or a farm like this in a place where you could potentially have a natural disaster. And then, of course, that can happen anywhere, like earthquakes or something like that. But it is a lot more challenging in the ocean just because of the natural events that are so difficult to protect the equipment, and you don't know what impact that would have on land either. So this is the presentation for wind energy.